Thank you, Speaker. I arrived to make a brief contribution on behalf of the Greens to this unprecedented legislation that we're seeing before us, and flag that my colleagues in the other place, David Shoebridge, Kate Fairman and Abigail Boyd, are all looking at the specific measures around justice, local government, domestic violence protections, but also ensuring consultation with health and mental health sectors. I want to echo the concerns raised in relation to the EPA provisions that provide ministerial orders, and also flag that my colleague Jamie Parker has been looking at those, and we wish to look at whether or not there can be further limits being put on those, or at least clarification in relation to that, because it does seem to be very broad sweeping powers. The other thing that I wish to flag, and I acknowledge that the Attorney General referred to it, we're moving at a rapid pace. There is a specific concern that we have in relation to homeless people under the Public Health Act provision changes that would see that if someone was not complying with a order and police were to return that person back to their place of residence, that obviously doesn't work for anyone that is sleeping rough or homeless, and we have circulated an amendment that would seek to do that in a way that would refer those people to whatever is the appropriate place for them to be returned, as is articulated by the Department for Communities and Justice through the Link to Home phone number and officers. However, I understand that an alternative amendment is being drafted, and we would hope that the government will bring that change into the other place so that we can see that issue being addressed. The other thing that I want to foreshadow is the fact that in this legislation and in the legislation we're dealing with today, there is absolutely no protection being offered or provided to people that are currently at risk of being evicted into homelessness in rental properties in this state. We have been calling for a moratorium on evictions, and as I understand it, we are going to see potentially some shifts around measures for renters when we're looking at the National Cabinet meeting tonight. However, we need some assurances to say that this government in New South Wales are taking the plight of renters seriously. Day by day, every member would be receiving messages of people that are needing to move out of their rental accommodation or are fearful that that is going to occur. And I would strongly ask that consideration be given to proposed amendments that we will be looking into in the other place that will seek to provide broad-ranging but limited still ministerial order provisions to enable the ministers responsible for the areas of the Residential Tenancies Act, the Boarding Houses Act, the Residential Land Lease Communities Act, the Retail Leases Act, in relation to both residential and commercial tenancies, to be able to make regulations to assist to ensure that people are not evicted into homelessness during this crisis, and to ensure that they are not slugged with unmanageable and massive amounts of accrual of rental debts during this time. These assurances, albeit they don't need to be articulated today, to allow and enable ministerial orders to ensure that these changes could be made for both residential and commercial tenants to be able to be provided with relief in this current pandemic, are absolutely essential. And while I appreciate that the National Cabinet are working on these measures right now, according to the information that we have, people are giving notice of their properties. They are moving back home and they are suffering the financial stress as of now. And any indication that we could give by specifically referring to ministerial orders around the issues of both residential and commercial tenancy would provide much needed assurance to people while these things are developed. We are not attempting to rush changes right now because we don't have all the answers, but what we're saying is there needs to be a clear message to people that are currently deciding whether or not to close their business, and people that are currently determining whether or not they have to move back in with people into an unsafe environment because they're renting and they can't afford to pay their rent. We need to give them a clear assurance today that there are plans in place to introduce those measures to put a moratorium on evictions in New South Wales. I appreciate we need to follow national structures, but we also need to recognise that right now, people are making the decision to move back with maybe their abusive partners because they cannot pay the rent anymore because they've lost their job, and people are making the decisions to close cafes or close shops because they do not believe or do not know that there is potentially rent relief coming for them. And so we can put a stop to some of this impact that is going to have detrimental consequences down the track by looking at being able to put some of these protections and provisions in place now. The final thing that I would say is that it is clear that there are big moves afoot in terms of what is planned. And as I raised earlier, I think that it is really important that we as a parliament are here being able to make those changes. The Greens' strong view is that we should not be putting a hold on our parliamentary sittings for 6 months. It is our strong view that we need to be in here in whatever way and whatever examples, in whatever systems we can establish, to be able to show that we are providing a multi-partisan leadership approach to how we are dealing with this crisis. But at the same time, in the middle of this pandemic, we should not be seeing less democracy and less accountability. It is exactly at these times that we need to be seeing more of those things. We need to see more cooperation, more collaboration, but we also need to make sure that those who are making the decisions are held to account. And we also need to ensure that there are ways to be able to raise concerns in the community for those who are vulnerable or forgotten or slip through the cracks. I thank everybody, particularly those ministers, officers and staffers who have been working collaboratively and collectively with us, responding to immediate issues and needs on the ground in all of our communities. I'm sure we have all had positive experiences with that, and I wanted to put the Greens' thanks on the record to all of those people that are working overtime to be able to do that.